What perfectly true story of yours sounds like an outrageous lie? I once nearly killed my older brother with a spear. He and I were playing cowboys and Indians, and being the only one with a BB gun, he was by default the cowboy. I had about a 5-foot long stick sharpened to a dull point on one end, and was the Indian. He walked up to me, summer in Georgia, where I had a pair of shorts between me and the Lord, and shot me point blank with that BB gun barrel full of sand, and then took off running. He went across the yard, turned right at the fence and continued running hard away from me. I didn't even think about the consequences, took the spear and made a javelin throw that an Olympian would be proud of, and hit him in the back of the neck at between 35 and 40 yards away. He faceplants with the spear standing upright like a proud flag I had planted on the moon. Then the spear falls over. The tip of the spear went between two vertebrae in his neck. The spear fell because the tip broke off in his neck. I celebrated the victory, then walked over to see what remained. We ended up in the emergency room, where the doctors decided not to operate, but rather to let the spear point work its way out on its own. It took 25 years to completely do that. My punishment for this act was that I received a BB gun, figuring that the worst I could do with that was to put his eye out, but that at least we would be on level footing in combat. Child rearing in the 60s was a different thing, and having a big family, built-in spares, helped a lot. So I guess Indians won. My house was broken into while I was asleep on the couch in the living room. I captured my would-be burglar with a battle axe replica that my roommate had on the wall. I made him call 911 on his own phone since I couldn't hold onto him and the axe and a phone at the same time. He tried to get away a few times. A very surprised 911 dispatcher sent the police who eventually got there, arrested my prisoner, and thanked me for not chopping him up. I received a car as a tip while working as a cocktail waitress, without extra service. I found out he had overheard me talking to co-workers about not having a car and lining up rides. Also, I was trying to save money to go back to college, since I did poorly the quarter before. Yes, still on the quarter system, and my parents stopped footing the bill. He paid his tab with his two friends and left me a $50 tip. Note, this was over 15 years ago and the tip was almost the cost of the bill. The car was delivered to me at work the next day by his lawyer and I never saw the man again. At first I wouldn't accept it because I wondered his motives and what strings would be attached. The lawyer assured me it was just a kind gesture and his clients wanted nothing in return other than that I return to school and finish my degree. Now it wasn't a fancy, flashy, brand new car, but it was still a car, only couple years old. Come to find out the man owned quite a few car dealerships as well as all of the company. I will not name the area. I never tell this to people, because heck, I probably wouldn't believe it either. I almost choked to death trying to warm up a frog I had picked up. It was early spring and I found a small frog moving slowly along my parents' pond. I picked it up and cupped it in my hands and held it up in my hands to breathe warm air on it and it jumped into my mouth. It lodged in my throat and I could feel it struggling as I hawked it up. Came home late one night to find David Bowie laying on my bed watching Mary Tyler Moore on my small black and white TV. Owned an after hours club in NYC, and my boyfriend met him and brought him home to hang out. I met a man who I can only describe as a face tattoo drug dealer constantly dressed in all black on the psych ward and would come and smelling of weed. Anyway, this sucker could just hold out his hand and birds would come to him. All kinds too, like chickadees, seagulls, and magpies. No food, no bait, nothing, just his open hand and he could do it on command. He was like some sort of goth Disney princess. This is the first one I actually have trouble believing. My stepdaughter acquired a guinea pig that, big surprise, turned out to be pregnant. She gave birth to 2 normal babies and a runt that was too weak to walk or drink milk from the mother. The little guy was on the way out, so I got my stepdaughter to hold the mother in a sort of sitting position while I squeezed some milk out of a nipple that was about the size of a decent pimple. I jammed the baby onto the nipple and he finally got the idea, drinking enough to kickstart his growth, while we held mom still for about 20 minutes. He lived and we eventually gave the 4 of them to someone else. Shortly after, a fox broke into their hutch and ate all of them except the runt. Well, that's really cool. It's like a children's book or something. I hope they all lived long and happily, mother sucker, goddammit. I watched a man with 2 peg legs walk up a harbor ramp at low tide. It was one of the singly most inspirational events I've witnessed. L. 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 My dad tried to smuggle a diamond out of Sierra Leone, but the guys helping him get it through customs ran off with the diamond. My grandfather brought a sword to the office and tried to behead my dad for a poor quarterly performance. Family businesses are tough. My grandfather has Alzheimer's dementia. Not sure. Asian family in Asia. Everyone denies mental issues. And before that incident, our family didn't know he was unraveling. A friend of mine told me about how he went to KFC and they ran out of chicken. The churches around the corner was flooded and the guy in the back was like, did KFC run out of chicken again? Like this happens on some sort of regular basis. Moving interstate, all our belongings on the little trailer, pulled over the side of the road so my soak could pee. Too close to the side of the road, and the trailer slid down a small ditch. Not enough to wreck the car but too steep for our little car to pull out. Next thing you know, a white minibus pulls up, and out jumps a half dozen guys who were a weightlifting team from I think Argentina. It was 25 years ago, not sure now. They lifted our trailer up onto the road, climbed back in their van, and drove off. I'm just imagining this happening without any words being said between any of you. One time as I was leaving the mall, I balled up a piece of paper and flicked it at the trash can and hit a fly in midair. I played 11 degrees of random internet separation and wound up at myself. I was working on my GeoCities website in 1998 on campus at UT Austin. I was looking for design ideas to poach HTML code from a friend's website, but he didn't have anything I didn't. So I went to his list of 20 plus friends, picked a random one, and looked at that guy's page for design ideas. Then I thought, I wonder where in the world I'd end up if I did friend of a friend 10 times like that. New York? China? ISS? So I did. Went to that guy's friends list, picked a random one, went to that person's friends list, and so on. The 10th person was an employee of UT, so I didn't even make it off campus, let alone to another country, but he had a webcam in his office, one of those that refreshed an image every 30 seconds. The lights were off, there were open mirror blinds, but I couldn't really see much beyond them. Then I noticed that he listed his office number, FAC 222, Flourn Academic Center, 2nd floor, room 222. I realized that I was doing all of this from a computer on the 2nd floor of Flourn Academic Center. I looked up to see that the computer I was on was at the end of an aisle directly across from room 222. I went to the window, open mini blinds, lights off, webcam on top of his monitor. I go back to my computer to see my own face in the webcam image peeking in his window. I met a guy on Xbox Live back when people were relatively new to it. Through a series of questions we discovered he was my neighbor, looked out the window and waved. Vanilla Ice left me a happy birthday voicemail. 15 years ago, I was friends with a guy who is a professional guitar tech and travels all over with different bands. He was in Miami with a fairly successful band, and Vanilla was at the show. Later, on the tour bus, my friend called me at like 3 AM to wish me happy birthday and handed the phone over to Vanilla Ice and he wished me happy birthday. Unfortunately, my service provider's voicemail system only allowed you to save a message for 7 days, and I couldn't figure out how to save it any other way, so it's disappeared into the ether. Spencer Horseman, the magician from America's Got Talent, lives in Baltimore and performs at a bar in the city. We went and saw him perform. He was great. After the show I had to use the bathroom and as I'm peeing, he comes in to pee as well. I go over and wash my hands and they have one of those hand blowers that is activated by hand motion. I say, hey Spencer, check this trick out. I wave my hands in front of the blower and say abracadabra and it starts. I turn and say, see, I can do magic as well. Guy started laughing hysterically. So, I captivated the guy who captivated 1,000 guys. Lived alone for a year when I was 8. TLDR, first generation Asian immigrants. Mom goes back to the motherland to renew a US visa. Gets stuck. I'm sent back ahead of time thinking it was going to be a couple week delay. Family friends helped me get settled back into a routine for school. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. Mom comes back to find me 40 PDS heavier cause 8-year-old me was eating 3 frozen dinners a night. Also almost burned down the house at least on 4 separate occasions. Discovered unlimited amounts of pee. And my father was a piece of crap. My brother landed a golf ball on a coffee cup after it ricocheted off the clubhouse ceiling and a policeman's forehead. This happened when my older brother was around 15. He learned how to play golf from my dad, a gold geek since young, and after a number of lessons, he became good enough to play a 9-hole course with dad and the adults. Now, at this hole, I can't remember what number, not a golf fan, he hit the ball too hard and sent it flying toward the clubhouse. Normally this would not be a problem since there was a net protecting the house from foreign, unwanted balls like this. However, there was a tiny hole in a section of the net and the ball went through it. After a couple of seconds, they heard people screaming from the clubhouse. Apparently, the ball went into the clubhouse, hit the ceiling 2 times, bounced off on forehead of a well-respected policeman, who is just resting after playing a course, and landed on a cup of coffee he was sipping. The impact was softened by the ricochet, but still enough to leave a bruise mark on his forehead. Needless to say, my father panicked and kept apologizing to the policeman. Fortunately, he was patient enough to see that this is no more than an epic coincidence. The story became the topic in the golf club for a couple of weeks though, and my brother did not play a game for months. I still think that my brother should have bought some lottery tickets that week with that kind of luck. When I was a little kid I convinced a friend to restart Pokemon Blue and trade me a Squirtle, claiming he'd be able to just reload his previous save anyway. I knew full well he'd lose all his progress but I wanted to catch them all. After we traded and he realized, crushed, that he'd lost everything, I told him he must have messed up somehow. Then, around 15 years later on Christmas Eve I posted this story anonymously in a confessions type thread on 4chan. He was in the thread. By insane coincidence I got a chance to apologize for my misdeed as an adult. I would have screen capped it for posterity, but I was a little nervous to keep records because he had to reveal a bunch of personal info to prove he knew me. Suffice to say, even the people in the thread didn't believe it wasn't just me acting both parts. This reminds me of that story where one confessed his parents found weed in his room but OP never smoked weed but got punished by his parents and sent to a boarding school. Someone replied to the thread it was him that randomly chucked a bag of weed through the window all those years ago to not get checked by the cops. I once ran into the then Prime Minister David Cameron on a beach in Cornwall. He was in a full wetsuit and I surfed alongside him. Cool. Meanwhile, over here to up north, the most interesting thing I've done in my life is have £1,000 in my bank account before I turned 19. When I was a kid we live about a mile from a huge world famous zoo. Being so close I eventually figured out a way to get in for free. This being long enough ago there were no security cameras so I started going in after it was closed. Doing it so often I figured out the guard's schedule and knew when it was safe to be there and not get caught. Me being a kid I took my bike in there in case I needed a fast getaway. Me being a very bad kid I stole beers from my brother's hiding place to stick in a backpack for private picnics in the zoo. PETA will downvote me for this but I shared beers and peanut butter sandwiches with a large female African elephant so often that she welcomed me with a hug when I showed up on my bike. I so want this to be true. 4th grade. We're playing kickball inside for pay because it's rainy. We're in a pretty standard basketball gym with hoops at each end and bathroom locker rooms in the far end. The kind with outdoors, just the long out and back hallway for privacy. Now for the unbelievable part. During our game on my first kick I looked at a friend and said I'm aiming for the hoop. Ball rolls up. I run up, wind up, and unload the most perfect kick I've ever kicked. The ball sails high and straight and true. It hits the backboard, does a little dance around the rim and plops right on through. I'm so stunned at the spectacle that I'm just standing on first watching it happen. I'm safe. Second kick. I say. I'm doing it again I do. Everyone is stunned by this one. I'm still a bit stunned it worked. Made it to second this time. Third kick. My final chance at the plate. Kicking it at the basket is cool, but inside the park homers are cool too. I'm not super fast so I needed to employ trickery. The outfield crew consisted of all dudes, so I aim for the girls' locker room. The kick sails long and just a bit left of the locker room door, but it lands with a bit of spin and bounces perfectly into the girls' locker room and down the little out and back hallway. No one is in the locker room, but all of the 4th grade boys are afraid of getting yelled at, so none of them try to retrieve the ball. Meanwhile, I'm closing on home plate looking to break up our tight game. I scored. We won. For any former 4th graders from Hudson Pep in Longview, Texas that feel like corroborating my story, this happened in like 1993 to 1994. At a church youth group I did the same thing with 3 consecutive half-court basketball shots. I'm terrible at basketball besides shooting. At church one fine Sunday, when I was around 16, I was leaning back in my chair against one of those flimsy fake walls room dividers. The wall, of course, because I really was kinda asking for it, gave way and I slipped and hit the wood floor of the gym with a sonic boom. At least it feels that way in the reverence of church meetings. It was loud enough that even the classroom feed set up next door fell completely silent. To find the source of the racket, the collapsible metal chair I'd been on folded in on me, and in my embarrassment, I began to laugh very loudly and awkwardly as I tried to untangle myself. The judgmental eyes of my peers, boring holes through my ability to focus, because of the building pressure on my abdomen from laughing and being folded in half, and perhaps because God wanted to punish me for interrupting the reverence of the room. I then proceeded to fart. The loudest fart ever produced. It reverberated off the metal chair seat that was still firmly attached to my butt, like a drum roll from heck, ending in a sound barrier shattering squeak of a finish. Everyone in the room at this point was stunned and just stared as I laughed hysterically at the misfortune of my existence. Finally, I had separated my body from the stupid chair and collected myself enough to just walk out. Only a few people giggled. For the most part, everyone else just stared in stunned silence as I walked, head held high, from the chapel, never to darken the doorway again. Literally, I never went back to that church. I preferred eternal damnation, I suppose. I can laugh now. At the time it was a bit of a horrifying experience. TLDR, I got stuck in my chair and farted in church. Oh night. You might have been the stuff of legend at that church after you left. My mom was peeing me off and being nasty and childish to my stepdad. I was in the field with my horse later and she came in and I whispered, "Give her heck." He promptly went up to her and bit her, and then again. He kept being super menacing to her, following her around with his ears flat against his head etc. Even though usually he was the most laid back animal ever. Eventually I went over to him, patted him and said, "Leave it," and he stopped. A year or so later he kicked the ever living crap out of a pony who slammed into me in the field and knocked me over. I was fine, just covered in mud, but once again he didn't stop menacing this pony until I went up to him and said, "That's enough now, stop." Even typing that sounds like total BS, but I swear it's totally true. I believe it. I mean, that one horse Black Beauty wrote that book. They are clearly really smart animals. When the original Mortal Kombat movie came out in theaters, I watched it with Mike Tyson, my friends. He, his bodyguards, and 3 or 4 other kids were the only people in the theater. I went to a house party once. People were all around the place. Living room, dining room, bedroom, just drinking and chatting. At some point, one guy started to hook up with a girl. They went to the bedroom too. Well, to frick. When they got there were 2 guys and 1 girl. They realized the couple was going to use the bedroom, so they started to leave. One of the guys, though, turned off the lights while leaving, but he realized the bedroom got really dark, so he closed the door and managed to stay inside, hidden. The couple started to make out on the bed, taking their clothes off, and my friend was watching, hidden, jerking off. At some point, your eyes get used to the dark, right? The girl was on all fours, while the guy was banging from behind. Then, all of a sudden, she screams, "Oh my god, there's someone here." My friend then started to apologize, putting his dong away, while turning on the lights. That's when the 3 of them saw it. Another ninja jerker managed to stay inside the bedroom, at the corner, masturbating. They both apologized and left the room. I remember reading this story on Reddit a while back. I located a multi-million-dollar jade deposit 2 years ago and have no plans to tell anyone where it is because it is on sacred land. IT belongs in a museum. I was out clubbing with friends one night, and as we were leaving the first bar we walked down an alleyway. I all of a sudden stopped and walked back to where there was a little old Italian man, because I could smell fresh chilies. In the back tray of his ute, there were mounds of these fresh chilies. I told him they were beautiful chilies, asked if he grew them himself etc. While my friends begged me to keep walking, he asked if I wanted some. I love chili so I said yes, expecting he'd give me a couple. He grabs this plastic bag and fills it with about 50 chilies. I ask him how much money he wants for them but he refuses, and with a hug sends me on my way. I only had a small purse on me, so I just carried the bag with me as we went about our night. We ended up going into 2 nightclubs. The bouncers had both asked to check in my bag, then laughed when I just said to them, "It's a long story." They let me keep them, so I just held them as I danced and drank the night away. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.